Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, as per your respective time zone. On behalf of Pentam and Services team, I'd like to welcome you all to 22C Cloud Financial Advisory webinar session. This important session is to keep you fully synchronized with the new features and functionalities as a part of this course release, which Oracle provides. My name is Hardik Patel. I'm an operations manager here at Evosys Managed Services Department. Today, I'm your host for this session, and I'm glad to introduce my colleague, Hinang Shah, who's part of our vast finance team at Evosys Mastec. Today, he'll take us through all the cloud financial updates for 22C course release. Today's session is planned for around 45 to 60 minutes, and we'll make sure that we also leave some time to answer questions if you may have. Before we move to today's agenda, let's have a look at a quick disclaimer, please. I'd like to convey your approach towards Oracle updates in a very simpler method. We'll be taking you through vital analyses for the 22C updates done by our experts, which will also help you incorporating new features and updates easily into your system. We will also sync you on any bugs or known issues if there are any. It's good to have an interactive session, so please do ask questions through chat or question panel. We have a panelist who'll be more than happy to answer any questions you may have during the session or at the end of the session. Just to give you a glimpse on how we have crafted the structure of this session. So first thing what you see is list of new features coming into 22C, detailing on features. So you get brief understanding on what new features are all about. And next one is what are the business benefits and important takeaway for you as decision maker. There are 4 components where we have done in-depth analysis of the features which we're going to present to you today. The first one is impact level analysis, which demonstrates the impact on end user. If it's a low impact, then regression testing can be avoided. If it's a high impact, then we need to opt for regression testing. The second one, which is we all are aware that there are some features which are by default also enabled by Oracle, and there are some which we need to opt for. The third one highlights the nature of the feature. There would be certain configuration which may be required and some can be used without any changes. And the last one, which is quick win. This term we simply use to convey that what is ready to use by investing minimum amount of time and what requires significant amount of time and efforts to make use of this feature. We won't take much of your time. We'll begin for today's session, but before that, on the screen with a quick poll, we'd like to know that which industry your organization belongs to. This will help us creating more specific content for the upcoming webinars. Without taking so much time, we'll be closing the poll in the next 10 seconds. And thank you so much once again. And just upon closing the poll, I'll be handing over to my colleague Pinang, who'll be taking you through today's cloud financial session. Thank you, everyone, for your inputs on the poll. I'll be closing it now. Thank you so much. And Pinang, you can unmute yourself, and the stage is all yours. Please begin. Thank you.
Thank you, Hardik. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. My name is Pinang, and today I'll be taking you to this Oracle Fusion Finance's 22C updates. So without any further delay, let's start the session. So as you can see in this session, we have bifurcated our updates into 3 parts. The first part is quick wins, right? So these are such features which requires no configurations at all, which will be available out of the box with the 22C updates. So in this 22C update, there are 10 such features. The next category we have is with quick wins with opt-ins, right? So these are technically quick wins, but which require some opt-ins to be enabled. So there are 5 such updates in this 22C update. And at last we have 10 updates which are not so quick wins, meaning thereby we need to do some configurations in order to use this functionalities. Now among these 25 functionalities, there are like a couple of enhancements which were user submitted idea, meaning thereby it was already pending with Oracle on Idea Lab, and Oracle finally acknowledged these ideas and materialized these ideas into some potential updates, right? So we'll look at those updates in a while. So let's just start with first category, that is quick wins. So the first update we have is for common financial modules, right? So in every update, Oracle, in every quarterly update, Oracle updates its services in terms of usability, resiliency, and performance, right? So in terms of usability, we have many changes this time. So like on the fiscal document pages, we'll be able to see now correct discount and adjustment amount, right? And there are many updates on AR invoice pages, right? Like on the edit transaction pages, now we'll be able to see a create note icon next to the invoice page, right? On the invoice page. And on the contact details, we will have a bill to contact list of value available, wherein user can select appropriate email address and phone number for particular customer, right? Then for balance forward bill process, this there is a minor enhancement in it. Like the status of this process will be updated to printed after successful delivery of the process when it is run concurrently with same parameters. Then for AR dispute management, let's say a user has initiated a dispute transaction and before it was approved, user left the organization, right? So in that case, we can very well withdraw such disputes, right? So these were the updates from usability perspective. In terms of resiliency, we have two updates. So the first update we have is for employee vacation rules. So whenever any user is configuring any vacation rule, and let's say the user do not have any privilege to reassign the task. So in that case, system will display appropriate error message to the user that the user or the approver do not have privilege to reassign the task. So this is an enhancement in error message display, right? Second update we have is for hold resolution workflow, right? So till now, the notification title were built by fetching all the details of invoice lines and distributions, but with this update, system will fetch only relevant details of invoice lines and distribution to build the notification title. So we can say the process orchestration has improved. And the last perspective is about performance. So there is one process in GL called balance transfer job. So it has been improved now. So while the process is running and with printing of output file with source and target information, the performance of this particular process has improved. Right, that was it about this service excellence continuing investment by Oracle. Next in common financial module we have is for this workflow rule configuration through spreadsheet. So in 18C update, Oracle had introduced this functionality to configure workflow rules through spreadsheet. And in every quarterly update, Oracle is enhancing this functionality by adding new usability and functionalities in this spreadsheet workflow rule configuration, right? So in this 22C update, we have received major two updates, right? So the first update is about job level options to better control the approvals. So how it will be useful to business? Like now we can configure workflow rules in spreadsheet in a way that we can route the approval to appropriate hierarchy, or you can also mention relative to which hierarchy this approval should go. Also, we can limit the number of audience within a set of particular hierarchy. Like the approval should be flowing between this hierarchy level only, right? So that is the benefit of this first update. The second update is about parallel approval of a group. So in parallel approval, we mention the minimum voting percentage that is required, right, to trigger the desired outcome. Now, this process will be, Oracle will be checking this process in real time. Like system will not wait for all the participant to finish their voting. As and when the minimum percentage is met, right, the voted outcome will be triggered. So these are the two updates that we had for workflow rules configuration through spreadsheet. Next update we have is for tax application, right? So this update is about quantity based taxes. Now, if we're using any tax which is based on quantity, we need to configure a unit of measure, right, on the manage tax rate page. we associate a unit of measurement with tax rate and we use it the same on the transaction page, right? But with this update, what Oracle has done is Oracle is allowed to use a different unit of measurement on transaction line. So even though it is different than what we have mentioned on the tax rate page, system will allow. The only catch here is that we just need to provide a conversion rule between the unit of measure that we have mentioned on the transaction page and the one that we have configured on the manage tax rate page, right? So we just need to provide a conversion rule, and whenever we are using any unit of measure which is different than what we have configured on the manage tax rate page, system will automatically convert it, right? And it will calculate taxes accordingly. So that was the update for quantity based taxes. So the next update we have is for general ledger. On the inquire on detail balance page, like we can see we have various parameters available, right? So for all the segment values, we were able to search it by their values, right? But with this update, Oracle has provided an additional search criteria in terms of search by description. So you can see in this screenshot that whenever we are searching for any segment value, we can search by description as well. So we can click on this radio button, enter the description, and we can search by the description. This is a small enhancement that is done on general ledger's inquire on detail balance page. Next update we have is for some process improvements on general ledger, right? So till now, this auto post journal, auto reverse journal, and manual posting of journal, these processes were not able to be run simultaneously, right? Even though they do not have any codependency or interdependency on each other, they will not be able to run simultaneously. But with this update, since they are not dependent on each other, they can be run simultaneously, right? And in addition to that, users can run like many instances of auto post journal at a single point of time, right? So that is another enhancement done in the general ledger for these general ledger processes. Next update we have is for lease accounting. Like in this update, Oracle has introduced a lease disclosure summary report, right, which will summarize many more details of leases, right? Like details of lease, any future lease payments, weighted average items, any lease expenses, cash flows, right? So all these details will be summarized into one single report. And moreover, this report is in line with disclosure requirement of IFRS 16 and ASC 42 for reporting, right? So in terms of business benefit, we can say that we do not need to worry about the year-end processes. We just need to rely on this single report, which is already in line with IFRS 16 and ASC 42. Right, so year-end process, year closure process, and the disclosure compliances are already met with. Next update is for accounts payables, and this is, we can say, specifically for US region, because this two form 1099 miscellaneous and 1099 NEC, these two forms are updated in Oracle, right? So instead of making annual revision, what Oracle has done is they made these two forms designed for continuous use, right? And these forms are updated to be in line with the new layout published by US IRS services, right? So these two forms are updated for year 2022, and in this update for form number 1099 miscellaneous, box number 13 has been updated to include this FATCA compliances, right? And as a result, the existing box number 13 through 17 are now renumbered as box number 14 to 18, because box number 13 is now having this compliance requirement of FATCA, right? So this was one enhancement for these two forms. Even though the electronic filing specification has not been published by IRS, so as and when it will be published, the appropriate changes will be done after that. Next update we have is for simplified activation of intelligent document recognition. This is also called as IDR, and IDR is one of the AP scanning invoice solution in Fusion available. So till now, we did not have any option to check whether IDR services are active or not, right? But with this update, Oracle has introduced like one status field on this manage intelligent document recognition option. So you can see here the status is showing is active, right? So if you're using it and it is active, it will show the status is active. Now, if it is not active, here on this page, in this part, instead of this save and close button, here we'll have the option of activate and then activate and close button, right? So we can simply activate these options from here. So this was the enhancement done on this activation of intelligent document recognition page. Next update is for payments. Now this was a user submitted idea, right? So this was pending with Oracle on the Idea Lab, and Oracle finally acknowledged it that this is actually required and it has some business benefits arising from it. So Oracle has finally, introduced this update as a part of 22C updates. So with this update, we can now configure our approval rules based on the total amount of a payment process request, right? So let's say if our payment process request is more than 1 million, then it should go to the chief financial officer for the approval, right? So we can configure such rules. So uh, there are some points which we need to consider before using this functionality, right? So the first one is that on manage payment option page, we need to check the conversion rate entry checkbox, and also we need to specify the conversion rate type, right? Second point to consider is that if you're using it for single ledger, there is no problem, but if you're using it for multiple ledger, then they should have the same primary ledger currency, right? So that is another point. And third point to consider here is that the approval rule will work on the basis of total amount of payment process request as a whole, right? So these are the point which we need to consider. And I personally believe this is one of the most awaited feature that was demanded from Oracle, and Oracle has finally and included this as an enhancement in this 22C update. So this is one of the good features that Oracle has brought with this update. The next and the last one in quick win category we have is update for account receivables, right? So this update is more about customer profile, right? So in customer profile, be it account level or site level, we had a field called preferred delivery method, right? And till now we had three options: print, email, and XML till now, right? But with this update, Oracle has introduced a new preferred delivery method, which is called portal upload method. So what will happen if we are selecting, if we select this portal upload method? So if we select portal upload as a preferred delivery method, any transaction associated with such customers, it will be excluded from delivery, either by print, email, or XML, right? So whenever we run the print receivables transaction program, system will not include such transactions in printing, right? So this is one nice feature when we just want to record the transaction, but we don't want any communication or invoice to be sent to customer. We can use this preferred delivery method. And in addition to that, if you want to customize this, let's say we want to include a couple of more delivery method, right? In customized way, we want to have like our own code for the preferred delivery method, right? So we can do it. We can go to manage receivable lookups, and in this lookup type, we can mention our lookup code, and the same lookup code will be available as a list of value in preferred delivery method field on customer profile, in account and site both. So this will behave in the same way it is, same way as of this portal upload method. Like even if you are choosing this custom preferred delivery method, system will not include such transactions, right? So this, this update can increase the efficiency of delivery of transaction by excluding some transaction that we don't want to include. So that was about quick win updates. Now let's move on to the 5 updates which are quick wins, but which requires opt-ins to be enabled, right? So the first update that we have is for lease accounting. So with this update, Oracle has introduced a feature called lease milestone tracking, right? So during the lease, there can be many events which can be identified as a milestone, right? And on the basis of this milestone, we can, plan our different activities like how to go ahead with the lease, whether we want to early terminate it, whether we want to renew it or not, right? So these milestone events are very benchmark events and which are very important because in lease, many times, these milestone events are associated with some penalties. If we do not fulfill the milestone event before specified date, the lease will result into some penalties, and sometimes it can be incentive. We can also provide some incentives also, like if we uh, achieve the milestone event before the specified date, we can earn some incentive on it, right? So these are very financially affecting things, milestone events. So Oracle has introduced that we can track now milestones on lease page, right? We can add the milestone activities, we can assign it to specific users, like which will be responsible for this milestone event to be achieved, and we can also mention the associated date with it, right, by when it should be completed. So till the milestone is not complete, system will send notification to the responsible users about the same, right? So this is an opt-in feature, but with 23A update, it will not be an opt-in. It will be by default available. So in terms of business benefit, we can say that we can educate the users about impending milestones, right? Like these are the milestones which are pending and which we need to um, fulfill within this specified time. So the next update we have is for lease termination activity, right? So at the end of lease, there can be many activities involved, right? Like termination of lease and assets, and exercise or cancellation of options, right? So these all updates we can update in bulk through an FBDI spreadsheet. So with this update, we can reduce the need to manually intervention to update or exercise options, or whether we want to terminate or not the leases. So these all activities we can uh, use it through spreadsheet template, and the end of lease activities will be very simplified, and it is very useful for large number of terminations or options to manage, right? So we can do it in bulk, and this process is very simple. Like from the FPDI spreadsheet, we can create a zip file, right? We can upload it file to interface, and then we need to run the import lease process, and the import type should be manage options and terminations. So this will import this all the end of lease activities like termination of assets, leases, or exercise or cancel options, right? So all things can be updated in bulk. So this is the feature like lease termination import utility that Oracle has introduced in 22C. The next in lease accounting is about lease rights and obligation, right? So during a lease contract, we can say that there can be many rights and obligation over a lease, right? Like lessor will provide a right to sublease the asset to lessee, right? They can also mention that whether the lessee can use the rooftop of a building or not. So there can be many rights, right? And there can be, on the other part, there can be many obligations as well, even though the, say, asset is used by lessee, but some fixed charges will be borne by lessor only. So there can be many obligations also, right? So in this update, Oracle has introduced a new tab on lease page, like this, the rights and obligations, right? On this page, if we go, we will have two tabs. One is for rights, other is for obligations. We can very well here add all the rights associated with this lease, right? And mention all the details. We can also associate and add any obligations if there are any with this lease, right? So that is one update for lease rights and obligation. So with this update, we can provide access to user about which rights and obligations are available over this particular leases, right? Next we have is the update for expense obligation, right? Now in this update, we'll be able to determine recovery of an expense through many new criteria, like for any expense payment request, till now we were able to determine recovery of an expense through expense type only, right? Because we would associate a text classification code with an expense type, and accordingly we will derive our recovery of the expense. But with this update, what Oracle has done is Oracle has introduced like many other criteria like expense location, employee legal entity location. We can associate these factors with expense type, and accordingly we can determine our tax recoverability of an expense. Correct. So there are four tax determining factors that we can use in tax rule for determining tax recoverability of an expense, right? So the first one is expense location. Let's say similar nature of expense can occur over different locations, and if it is happening at different location, it will be subject to the local rules and regulations. Like it can be recoverable or it cannot be, right? So based on this we can create this tax determining factor. The next is tax product category. Now, based on the nature of item or services that we have procured, it can be subject to tax recovery. Like certain items will be and certain items will not be. Correct. And the last one is about employee location. Like based on the location where employee is situated, right? The tax on the expense report may or may not be subject to tax recovery. So these are the three new factors that Oracle has introduced. So we can associate it with expense type, and accordingly we can determine the tax recoverability of expense payment request. Tax classification code was already there, right? So these are the three new factors that Oracle has introduced with this update, right? So this with this update, it provides us immense flexibility to determine the recovery of an expense rather than defining new expense types, right? We just can use the same expense type, and we can use the new tax determining factor that is available with this update. Next update we have is for expense application. Now in 22B we had received an update for expense like manual application of cash advance is now available, right? Now in this update, the notification and on the expense report, these advances will be visible. So whenever there is any cash advance which is applied to an expense report, right? So the same will be visible on the notification area. So let's just check this. This is how the notification for the expense will look like, right? And here if you see, the total reimbursable amount was 6250, but out of which the advances applied are 3500. So this is enhancement, like with this update we will be able to see like how much advance was adjusted against our expense. It will be visible here in the notification area. Also in the expense report, if we check, see this is the expense report, right? There is a new field called cash advances applied. So out of 6250 of total expense, we have cash advances applied to the extent of 3500. So it will also be available. So these are two minor enhancement done in terms of manual cash advances applied on expense report, right? And let's say any cash advances has been applied on an expense report, and the approver or the auditor has rejected such expense report, right, thoroughly. So in that case, the expense advance that was cash advance that was applied, it will be available to user on his dashboard as available cash advance. It will be added to his cash advance balance, right? And let's say during the audit the expense amount are adjusted or short paid, right? Or they were reduced, and they were reduced in such a way that the cash advance is exceeding the expense amount. So in that case there will be some surplus, right? So that surplus amount will be sent back to user's dashboard as an available cash advance, right? So these are the points which we need to consider, and the only catch we here the only catch we have for this update is that we need to enable this 22B's opt-in feature of manual application of cash advances, right? If we have opt-in to this feature, we will be able to use this functionality. So that was about the quick win updates, right? So now we'll check all the not quick wins update. Like these updates will require some configurations to be done, right? So the first update we have is for tax application, right? So if we're using an integration with third-party uh, tax, right? In that case, um, this enhancement will be helpful, right? We can exclude certain payables invoices, right? Which we know that which will not result in any taxes, right? So we can exclude those payables invoices by configurations, right? We can mention that this particular invoices should not be a part of tax calculation from tax partner. So um, whenever there is a call we are made from our system to partner tax engine, if we are sure that this particular set of invoices will not result to any taxes, right? So we can configure it in our system. So the configurations can be done on the basis of payable sources, supplier types, or even by supplier or supplier sites, right? So we can do some configuration in our system that if the source of this transaction is this, then it should not be included into this tax calculation from partner tax engine, right? So this is an enhancement for tax calculation, and there are some points which we need to consider for you before using this functionality. Since we are excluding some payables invoices, right? So those invoices will not be reported by the tax partner because we are not making any calls to the partner tax engine for such invoices, right? And as I mentioned earlier, that exclusion can be based on three categories, like either it can be on the basis of payable source, it can be on the basis of supplier types, it can also be based upon supplier or supplier sites, right? We just need to define some lookup options and lookup values, right? And the lookup value that we define, they are not that effective, right? So they will be checked as on date. Like whenever I'm using this functionality, it will be checked on that date that if it is enabled or not, right? There is one restriction that any payable source that starts with ORA underscore, it cannot be used as an exclusion, right? So this is one thing that we need to understand. And the exclusion will work only for the payables invoices, right? It will not be available for any purchase order or requisitions, right? So we can exclude payables invoices from tax partner calculation for specific payable source, supplier type, or supplier sites. Next update we have is for product fiscal product fiscal classification, right? So if you're using any tax rules or condition or exception, right, for inventory based purchases, so now with this update we'll be able to use those tax rules, exception and condition for non-inventory based purchases also, right? So what will happen in this update is like in certain cases the product fiscal classification type will get defaulted from the purchase category that is mentioned on the transaction line. So now you'll be wondering like what will be those cases. So in a case when we have some non-inventory purchase transaction, right? So in those transaction will not be mentioning any product fiscal classification, right? Because there is no item associated with it, right? So in such cases, what system will do? System will automatically identify the purchase category of such non-inventory based purchase and stamp it into product fiscal classification, right? Now, since we have already configured our rules for product fiscal classification, and we are using it in tax calculation for inventory based purchases, right? So the same will be used for tax calculation of non-inventory based purchases, right? So this will help us to limit the configuration of tax rules and conditions, because we do not need to reconfigure it again for non-inventory based purchase. We can use the existing rules, right? So it will be a benefit in terms of runtime processing and performance, because the tax rule conditions are very limited. We have not configured many tax rule conditions for it. So this was the update from the perspective of product fiscal classification. Now, next update we have is for tax application. Now this update is for intercompany invoices. So till now what was happening is that if there is any intercompany invoice created, right, so the tax rate code that is mentioned on the receivables invoices, the same tax rate code will be used on the payables invoices as well, right? So there can be some requirement of client, like we want to use output tax rate in receivables invoice and input tax rate on payables intercompany invoice, right? So with this update it can be done. So if we go to manage tax rate page now, if we go to any tax rate which is output tax, now we'll be able to see these in rate period details. There will be one additional field called input tax rate for intercompany payables transactions. So this will be in this will be this tax rate code will be used whenever we are using any intercompany transaction, and on the corresponding payables invoice this particular tax rate code will be used, right? So this is one enhancement for intercompany payables invoices. There are some points which we need to consider before using this functionality. The first point is that this enhancement is available only for intercompany payable invoices, not for any other transactions, right? So the tax rate code that we mentioned on the input tax rate for intercompany payable invoices, it will be available only for intercompany payable invoices, not any other, right? Then let's say we are adding a new rate period details. We have ended the existing one and we are now adding new rate period details, right? So the existing input tax rate details will be copied. We don't need to manually apply it again, right? If you want to update it, that is a different thing, we can very well do it, but system will automatically copy the existing tax rate codes. Now in order to a tax rate code to appear in the list of value while choosing the input tax rate code for intercompany payable transaction, there are some conditions which should be fulfilled, right? So the tax regime and the tax that it should be same for both the tax rate code, the one mentioned on the receivables intercompany invoice and on the payable intercompany invoice. Both tax rates should be represented by the same tax regime and same tax. Second point is that for the tax rate code that we are using as an input tax payable intercompany invoice tax rate, it should have this allow ad hoc tax rate checkbox enabled, right? The third one is that tax jurisdiction should be the same on both the tax rate codes. So it should be the same or it should be none, right? So there cannot be any case where we are using different tax jurisdiction or different tax rate code. So in that case, we will not be able to see our tax rate code in list of value, right? In order to appear this tax rate code in list of value, it should have the same tax jurisdiction, right? Also, there is one limitation to it, like we can only update it from the front end. We cannot update this input tax rate code through rapid implementation sheet or any REST API. We have to go to edit tax rate page, and when we have to manually edit it. Now the next update is very big impact, right? This is one of the very good feature that Oracle has introduced in this update. This is about control budget. Now in control budget, Oracle has introduced a concept of cash budget, right? So what this cash budget will do, it will check the payments or the fund available for making the payments, right? So whenever we are running any payment process request, system will check in real time the cash control budget balance available against this particular payments. So if there is enough fund available, system will make the payment, and if there are not enough fund, right, so this payments will go into error, right? So let's just see like how it will look like when the payments are in error. So if you can see, this payment process request went into error, and this was the error message, right? The no funds are reserved for this payment because there wasn't sufficient fund available in the cash budget, right? So now you'll be wondering like how we can enable it and how we can use it. So I'll cover it in the next few slides. Right now, let's check like how we can resolve the payment validation error, right? So if we go to any particular payment, we'll be able to see this fund status, right? So it is showing as failed because it was not able to reserve the cash control budget amount, right? So if we click on this hyperlink, we'll be able to see that what is the status and what is the reason for it, right? So we can see the control budget available, we can see the distribution account, and we can see the reason, like it was insufficient fund. So that's why the budget was not reserved, right? So any payment that that went through this control budget, it will reduce the balance of cash control budget, correct? And let's say after making a payment, I have voided the payment, right? So in that case, the payment that that reduce the budget amount, it will be added back into the budget and it will increase the budget amount. So whenever we void a payment, right? Now let's talk about the funding the cash control budget. So this cash control budget will also be subject to any manual journal entries. So if we go to the manage budgetary control page, we will have this additional option as revenue and cash controls, right? And here there is one section called accounts in journals subject to cash controls. So the natural account that we mention here, it will be subject to cash control, cash budget control, right? So any debit to this natural account will result into increase in cash control budget, and any credit to this natural account will result in expenditure, or we can say negative line in cash control budget, a reduction in cash budget, right? So this this cash budget is not only for payment, but also it is applicable at journal lines also. Now let's talk about how to use it, right? So on the manage budgetary control and encumbrance page, we will have an option to enable cash controls for a ledger, right? So we can enable it for our particular ledger and we can use it. And in terms of subledger, there are some setups we need to do to use this functionality, right? Like in receivables, we need to use the multi-fund accounting. Then automatic offset on common options for payables and procurement page should be enabled. We also need to use the pooled account for the bank on the edit bank account page, right? So whenever we enable this cash control on ledger level, system will automatically generate a generic cash budget, right? It will not be available in use, but we can go to that particular budget. We can customize it according to our needs. Like we can add the segments, we can update the hierarchies, we can add the supplemental rules to for exception, right? So in that way, after configuring it, we can use it and we can fund it. So there are a few points, like the budget date will be the payment date, right? And the budget account which will be used will be the invoice distributions combination, right? Whole of the invoice distribution will be picked up except the natural account. The natural account will be picked up from bank, and this combination will be checked for budget, right? So accordingly, we need to fund this particular budget account only, right? And if we have made any partial payment to an invoice, so accordingly, the partial budget will be reserved only. So this was one of the most interesting update in control budget, and it has huge impact as well, right? If we're using it. Okay, so next update we have is for expenses. So in 22B, we had this, enhancement to allow split expense lines into various project and accounts, right? Now with this update, Oracle has, allowed us to select multiple lines at a time, and we can, select these multiple lines and we can split allocation. We can split it across various projects and accounts at the same time. So it is very ease of use, we can say, right? If you have multiple expense line which we need to split across various or different projects, we can definitely do it from the expense dashboard. Next update for expense application we have is for creation of expense item through employees personal email address. So till now what was happening, like user had to send an email from their work email address only, right? They send the receipt to from work email address to Fusion, and then accordingly the expense receipt will expense item will be created, correct? But with this update, what Oracle has done is Oracle has identified that user can add its personal email address in HCM record as a type of home. So whenever user is sending an email from his personal email address, system will allow it. System will treat it as a valid email address to create the expense lines, right? So it is ease of use, we can say, right? employee do not have to forward the email from their personal email to work address, and then from work email address they have to apply, right? So they can very well do it right now from the personal email address directly. Okay, so this is also one of the really nice feature. This was a user submitted idea, right? It was pending with Oracle since February 2021, right? And Oracle has finally acknowledged that this is a must feature that we should have, right? And it is now included as part of 22C update. So this update is about exclusion of certain adjustment code for corporate card transactions for MasterCard. So let's say there are in any corporate card transaction file of MasterCard, right? We can exclude certain adjustment code, right? If the adjustment codes are of, let's say, waiver fee, any adjustments or any payment we have done, right, which we do not want to import into a Fusion and create expenses, correct? So what we can do is we can go to standard lookup. In this lookup type we can add our adjustment codes that this particular adjustment should be excluded while we are running the upload corporate card transaction process, correct? So system will exclude this particular adjustment codes, right? And in this way, if let's say these adjustment code are representing the payments, right? So we can exclude those payments in order to avoid overpayment to card issuer, right? So this is one really nice feature that I find. This was one of the most awaited feature as well also. Next update we have is for reimbursable currencies in expense report by business unit, right? It is for expense only. This was again a user submitted idea, and this was very well, I think it was submitted in September 2020, right? And with this update what we can do is, like, we can go to a particular uh, expense system options, and for a particular business unit we can allow that only this particular currency should be allowed, right, for reimbursement, not any other. So till now we were able to select any currencies available, right? So with this update, what we can do, we can allow only specified currency for a particular BU, so that our geolocation regulations are complied with, right? And also, while creating an expense report, user can by mistakenly select any other currency as well. So this will not happen now, right? The we can now restrict the reimbursable currencies in expense report based on our business unit. So this is also one of the really good feature that Oracle has introduced, right? So the next update we have is for payables application, right? Now, if we're using the intelligent document recognition, the scanning solution of Fusion, with this update, what will happen is that whenever we send an email to Fusion, right, the content of email body, it will be also preserved on the supplier invoices as a second attachment, right? The first attachment will be the scanned invoice itself, correct? And in the second attachment we'll be able to see the whole body of the email that was sent by supplier. So any suppliers, let's say directly sending email to Fusion, and through IDR we are creating the invoices, right? So we can very well preserve all the details of email body, and we can get those details on supply invoice page itself, right? So let's say if there are multiple invoices in one particular email, so in that case, in all of the invoices created, first attachment will be the invoice itself, and the second attachment will be the body of the email itself. So we can track all the communication done by supplier, and we can also negotiate with the supplier on the details mentioned in the email itself, right? And in order to use this functionality, we cannot configure it. We have to raise an Oracle SR. Oracle will identify whether we can use it or not, and if it is available for our pod or not, right? And if necessary, Oracle will also share the prerequisite that needs to be done, right? So nevertheless, we need to raise an Oracle SR if you want to use this functionality, right? So the last update that we have is for advanced collection module. So this update is about dispute creation page. Like there are two parts of this update. First part is about access to attachment category, right? And second part is about security to attachment for particular attachment categories. So till now on manage dispute page, like whenever we are creating a dispute, we are able to select only one category, right? That was customer transaction only. But with this update, we'll be able to access all the attachment categories available for a particular transaction, right? It can be dispute, it can be collection, it can be customer transaction, it can be anything else, right? So now we have access to all the attachment categories while adding an attachment on create dispute page, correct? Now the finance manager can very well, control, like a particular user with particular role can, update, add, delete, or read a particular attachment for a particular attachment category, right? So this all security configuration can also be done. So these security configuration will be a two-step process. Like first we need to identify, right? We need to gather all the attachment security policies, right? Let's say I want to say that the collection manager should have access to all the attachments on attachment category with collection, and they can add, they can delete, and they can also read it, right? But the receivables manager should only have a read access to all the attachment on attachment category with collection, right? So I can draft this many policies, right? I need to have it on before configuring the security configuration, right? So I need to gather all such attachment securities, and then I need to define a security policy for it, right? That if the user is this, and if they have this particular attachment category, then they should be able to do whether add, delete, or read or not, right? And then we have to define this particular policy to and attach it to a particular role, and roles will be assigned to users, right? So in this way we have configured the access to attachment category. Now it has been enhanced to include all the attachment categories available, and now we can also secure our attachment categories based on some data security policies, right? So that was it about all the updates that we had, right? Thank you everyone for for your time and for attending this session. I hope this session was really helpful to you, right? Thank you once again, and over to you, Hardik.
So thank you, Pinang, for wonderful insights, and thank you everyone for listening to us patiently. We won't take much of your time, just next 2 minutes. Before you will leave us, we'd like to thank you once again, everyone, and let's check if we have any questions around. Um, there was a question, and I think that's been answered. If not, the panelist will be taking care of the same. Komo, can you confirm that the question's answered?
Yes, Hardik, it's answered.
Okay, thank you so much. If you still have any other questions, you can ask us or you can reach out to us even at a later stage. And okay, so on the scale of this, we'd like to know your area of interest, whether it's technology innovations, managed services, value-based analysis, or analytics, or cloud transformation. So this will help us crafting more value-based webinars going forward. And by the time you give us the poll result, would like to note down, would like you to tell, would like you to note that we'll be sending you presentations PDF along with the thank you email on this, so you can pass it to your colleagues. If you'll also get the recording of this session on a single page, which you can access to, and so that will be out to you in a few days' time, and on your official email. So once again, thank you so much, and just I'll be closing this poll now. And there's one more thing that if you can let us know how we did today on today's session on the scale of 1 to 5. Thank you so much for the input, and just less than a minute now, and we'll be Closing today's session. We'd like to quickly show you that what are the upcoming sessions coming in. We also have a PPM, Project Portfolio Management, a dedicated session. So if anyone, any of your colleagues would like to register, please use the links sent to you earlier. And not with this list, would you mind telling us that if you attended any previous sessions earlier conducted by Evosys Mastic? Thank you once again. So these are the list of webinars coming in. Next week we have a PPM and HCM and supply chain session. And with this, we would like to thank you once again, everyone, for patiently listening to us and for your valuable time and also the feedback. Thank you so much once again. Really appreciate it for your time.